A warm welcome to all my dear 4th standard children. Today we are going to see the second part of your air, water and weather chapter, right. So, in the first part you learned about the moments of the earth, what is rotation, what is revolution, and also you learned about what is humidity, what is weather, right, and you also learned the difference, what is sea breeze and what is land breeze, right. Now, in this session we are going to learn about water, right. So, of course, we all know that water is a natural non-living thing that is present on the earth, right. So, of course, water is not available on the other planets or other places, right. So, on the earth we have water, nearly 70% of water is present on the earth. The remaining 30% we have land. So, 70% of the surfaces of earth is covered with water, right. Now, we use water for various activities, right. We use water for drinking, for cooking, for washing, for bathing. So, we need water to do various type of activities, various type of work. Without water we cannot able to do these activities. So, water is very essential for all this type of activities, and we get water from the sources. Where do we get water? So, we get water from rain. So, when it rains we get water from the clouds, and this water is filled on the land in terms of, it can be rivers, lakes, ponds. So, wherever there is slopes, the water is filled in that places. So, we get later we get water from the well, from the river, from the pond, from the lake, from the sea, right. So, we get water from these sources. So, when the rain comes, so the water sometimes goes deep under the soil. So, under the earth, when there is many slopes, deep slopes, so the water seeps inside the underground of the earth. So, thereby under our earth there is a place where there is full of water is present. So, this water layer we call it as underground water, or we can say aquifer, right. So, we get water from these sources, as well as under the earth we get water. So, we used to extract water through the pumps and all, right, through the bore, right. So, we get water from the underground water and we use it, right. So, these are the uses of the water, right. Now, let us see what are the various forms of water. So, this is the underground water, which is also called as aquifer. So, where we can see the water is stored under the earth, right. Now, let us see the different forms of water. So, we see water in various forms on the earth, right. So, it can be as water, it can be as ice, or it can be as water vapor. So, there are 3 forms of water that is present on the earth. Now, these forms, I can change water into water vapor, or I can change water vapor into water, right. So, changing of forms of the water, how I can change the form of water. So, if I do heating or cooling, so if I cool the water will be changed into ice. If I cool the water vapor, the water vapor will be changed into water, right. If I heat the water will be changed into water vapor. So, I can do heating or cooling to change the forms of water. Now, there is a separate process which we call it as, if I change the changing of water into water vapor is known as evaporation. So, evaporation is a process where there is a change of water into water vapor on heating. So, if I heat the water, only the water will be changed into water. So, this process is known as evaporation, and The next one is condensation. So, what is condensation? Condensation is again a process where there will be a change of water vapor into water on cooling. So, if I cool the water vapor will be changed into water. So, this you would have seen in your tiffin boxes, right. So, sometimes if your mother is packing you a hot lunch or hot breakfast, right. So, once you open the box, on the lid, back side of your lid of the box, you can see tiny drops of water will be present. So, what that is? It is nothing but because of the condensation, the water vapor from the food rises up as it touches the surfaces of the lid is cool, right. So, once the water vapor becomes cooled down, so again water vapor will be changed into water, so thereby forming tiny drops of water. So, these tiny drops of water form the clouds on the nature, right. So, naturally this condensation process, evaporation process happens on the earth. So, this continuous change, when there is a changes in the continuous process, we call it as water cycle. So, where in the water cycle the water will be changed into water vapor, evaporates into water vapor, and again when the water vapor condenses, the water vapor will be changed into water and we get rain, right. So, this we call it as water cycle. Now, there are different names on the forms, different water when the water condenses, right. So, for example, we can see the one by one. The first one is dew. So, dew is nothing but when the water vapor condenses to form tiny drops. So, this you will be seeing on the early morning. So, on the early morning when you woke up, and if you see on the grass, on the plants, on the leaves and all, so there will be very tiny drops, right. So, those are called as dew drops. So, you can see here, right. So, during the early morning when you woke up and you can see the dew drops. So, dew drops are nothing but water vapor condenses to form very tiny drops of water, which is known as dew drops, right. The next one is fog. So, what is fog? So, fog is nothing but this tiny drops form a thick cloud of dust particles, right. So, that is known as fog. Sometimes during the early morning you must have seen some clouds that is formed on the ground, right. So, something is blocking the road, right. So, this is called as fog. So, fog is nothing but a thick cloud which is formed on the earth's surface, where there will be full of tiny drops of water will be present on the fog, right. So, this is known as fog. And the next one is frost. What is frost? So, frost is nothing but when the dew drops freezes to form crystals of ice. So, this you can check it out in your refrigerator. So, open your refrigerator and open your freezer box. So, on the sides of the freezer box, if you scratch and see, you can see a powdery ice will be formed, right. So, it is nothing but frost. So, the name of that is frost. So, frost is formed on the earth due to the dew drops. When the temperature is very low, it freezes, thereby it forms very crystals of ice. So, that is known as frost. And the next one is hail. What is hail? H-A-I-L. So, hail is nothing but when the rain drops freezes and they form pellets of ice. So, in Tamil they will say Alangatti Malai, they will say, right. So, in English it is called as hail. So, when the rain drops, sometimes due to the very low temperature, the rain drops freezes and thereby it forms pellets like ice. So, this we call it as hail, right. So, the next one we will learn about snow and rain. So, snow is nothing but when the weather is very extremely cold, so the water vapor condenses to form snow, right. So, pani they will say, right, and then rain. So, rain, of course, you know what it is, when the water vapor condenses, so and it falls on the ground in the form of water. So, this we call it as rain. So, you learnt the differences of dew drops, fog, frost, hail, snow and rain. right. So, all this process when the water vapor condenses, so there are many names that we call on the change of water, right. So, now let us see the water cycle. So, as I told you, water cycle is nothing but when the changes of water that takes place on the earth naturally. So, this is known as water cycle. So, this water cycle we also call it as hydrological cycle. So, here you can see the sea water or it can be a land water. So, the water when the sun heats up the water which is on the land or on the sea. So, the water changes into water vapor. This process we call it as evaporation. So, the water vapor forms tiny drops of water, right. So, this tiny drops of water forms the clouds. So, when the clouds condenses, when the clouds cools down or when the water vapor cools down, so the water vapor again changes into water, thereby the water cannot able to stand there. So, it will fall as rain, right. So, again the rain is coming down on the ground, again the water is filled on the land or on the sea, right. So, again the water will be changing into water vapor. So, this cycle is continuous and keeps on going on the earth. So, this we call it as water cycle. So, this water cycle will be your diagram also. So, you have to draw neatly and you have to write what is where we have to draw the evaporation and condensation, everything you have to draw neatly, right. So, now let us see the water purification methods. So, how we can purify water. So, if the water is pure, we can able to use it for drinking, cooking, washing and all. Suppose if the water has impurities, what is impurities? So, impurities are nothing but the substances that make water unfit for use. So, that we call it as impurities. So, when the water contains the impurities, we call it as impure water. So, how we can pure the water from the impurities? So, there are actually two types of impurities. One is soluble impurities, the other one is insoluble impurities. So, soluble impurities examples are salt and sugar, but insoluble impurities are, it can be pebbles, stones, mud, sand. So, these are all insoluble impurities. So, now there are few methods that we have to undergo to purify the water from the impurities. So, usually when the water is filled with, when the water is filled with soluble impurities, we have to boil or we have to evaporation or we have to do the distillation. Suppose if the water has insoluble impurities, we have to do some process, thereby we can make the water pure. So, what are the methods? So, here we let us see some methods. One is known as sedimentation. So, what is sedimentation? Sedimentation is nothing but when the water has insoluble impurities, they are kept as it is without shaking. So, without moving the particular water, we have to keep the water as it is, thereby the impurities everything will be settling down at the bottom, right. So, when the impurities settling on at the bottom of the water particles, so this process we call it as sedimentation, right. So, sedimentation is nothing but settling down of impurities, thereby leaving the water on the top of it. The next one is decantation. Once after the sedimentation, the water has to be removed out, right. So, when this sedimentation process is over, take the water and you slightly tilt the water, so that the water which is present on the top of it, we can remove it easily, right. So, this process we call it as decantation. So, the process after the sedimentation, the water is gently poured out into another container, thereby we can remove the sediment impurities. So, this process we call it as decantation. So, the decantation is usually done after the sedimentation. So, sometimes in the sedimentation process, some chemicals are added to the impurities, thereby the chemicals stick to the impurities and the sedimentation process will be faster for the removing the insoluble impurities. So, next we will see filtration. So, filtration is nothing but passing the water into the filter paper, thereby removing the insoluble impurities. So, once after the after the decantation, the water is passed into the filter paper, thereby the impurities are collected in the filter paper, leaving only the pure water into the container. So, this process we call it as filtration. And the next one is chlorination. Chlorination is nothing but adding chlorine chemicals into the water to remove the germs present in the water. So, after this filtration process, the water will not have any type of insoluble impurities, but it may have some germs. So, to remove the germs, once we add chlorine tablets into the water, so the chlorine will kill the germs present in the water, thereby making the water pure for drinking, right. So, next the next method, that is boiling. So, boiling is a very simplest and safest method, where once we boil the water at a high temperature, once the water boils, the germs present in the water gets destroyed, gets killed with the help of boiling process. So, the boiling process is the best and simplest way of method that is used to purify water. So, these are all the methods that we have to undergo to do the purification process of water. So, children, today in this session you have learnt more about water, right. So, you learned about water uses, water sources and the forms of water, and also you learned the process where the water changes from one form to another. What is evaporation, what is condensation, and also you learned the different names of water when the water vapor condenses, right. For example, you learnt about what is dewdrops, what is hail, what is frost, what is fog, what is snow, right. So, go through this lesson, as well as you have learnt about the different methods of purification of water, right. So, what is sedimentation, what is decantation, what is filtration, what is chlorination, and what is boiling, right. So, what all these process have a definition. So, go through that, and once you are thorough with this lesson, take the self assessment and do the self assessment. Once you do the self assessment, you will come to know how far you have understood about the chapter. Hope I will meet you with a new chapter from your 4th standard science subject. So, hope this class is useful for you. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.